Welcome to the webinar, Symphony of Minds, Feeling Our Way into a Vibrant Future. We are honored you have joined us today and trust it will be a fascinating journey into a more viable and vibrant future for all. We extend our deepest thanks to each of the panelists and moderators for contributing their unique expertise, and we are so looking forward to hearing from everyone. First, a bit of context. Once upon a time, we humans lived symbiotically within nature, much as all species on this planet do. Over time, we moved to an agricultural society which gave rise to property, production, and commerce, and set into motion the pursuit of gain, the haves and the have-nots. Nature, once our home, was demoted to a commodity to be used, sold, and traded. Global travel developed, allowing for interfertilization between cultures, and our global civilization began its centuries-long escapade into more, bigger, and faster in the name of progress. Life became compartmentalized. Religion, music, dance, art, and education, once an integral part of community life, found separate niches in society. Religion moved to houses of worship, music to concert halls, and so forth. Competition replaced cooperation as people began to seek personal gain over that of others, or even over society as a whole. Our compartmentalized civilization continued to expand as our connection to one another and to the natural world contracted. Was there purpose to this foray into hierarchy and divisiveness? Perhaps. We have the symphony orchestra, the printing press, the Sistine Chapel, the internet, worldwide moments of unity such as meditation or the Global Citizens 24 hours live stream, just finished a few hours ago, it may still be ongoing. But now we're at a juncture. Earth can no longer sustain our ever-expanding extractive way of life, and she is ailing under the weight of human greed and overreach. Systems and customs are unraveling, facts are no longer factual, and governments no longer trusted or trustworthy. Media has lost credibility. We are being tracked, monetized, and controlled. But perhaps this unraveling itself is serving as a wake-up call from the universe, as it feels as though more and more people are searching for a life of contentment, simplicity, and relationship. Time and space to be instead of to have. So where do we go from here? Is there a way that we humans can understand more fully that although we appear to be trillions upon trillions of seemingly disparate organisms, we, that is the earth, heavens, and all living beings, are one global, cosmic, interconnected being? Can our global civilization learn to live with and within the natural world? And if so, what role can each of us play in this unfolding? These are some of the questions we hope to explore in today's webinar. A few last minute notes. Video is extremely data consumptive. So for the sake of the earth and your personal health, please make every effort to watch this video or this webinar and all videos when possible from a hardwired connection rather than through wirelessly through a smartphone or Wi-Fi. Besides being better for the earth, your connection will be far more reliable, secure, and private. And now Ken and Amber, please introduce yourselves and take it from here.
Thank you, Kate, and hello, everyone. I'm Ken Burrows, and I look forward as one of your moderators today to be with you. And let me introduce my fellow moderator, Amber Yang. Amber is the social media coordinator from the Stop 5G International and the restorative justice specialist and wellness coordinator for a Northern California school district. She's a regular contributor also to Project Censored, a grassroots media watchdog group who regularly writes about the importance of critical media literacy. and the news that doesn't make the news, including wireless radiation and 5G issues.
Thanks, Ken. Nice to be here. Thanks for the welcome and the introduction, Kate. I want to introduce Ken Burrows now, and both he and I will be flowing us through the next few hours together. So Ken Burrows has taught holistic health studies at San Francisco State University for 30 years, teaching about the integration of personal, social, and environmental aspects of health. He's also a member of the executive board of Media Freedom Foundation, which oversees Project Censored, which, as he said just earlier for mine, is a national effort to educate the public about media literacy and the importance of independent news and the common good. And he and his students have researched and published news about the health concerns of EM radiation and 5G technology and a variety of other eco-social concerns. So here we are. Thanks for tuning in. And before we begin with our first speaker, just a few housekeeping items before we start this. So later in the webinar, we'll provide an opportunity for the panelists to answer any questions from the audience. And you can do so by going into the chat box and just typing your question directly in there, and we'll be receiving them. And one more thought as we move through this webinar, it's just to acknowledge that it's on Zoom and to allow for any technical imperfections to occur because they may arise. So we just ask for your acceptance and your patience with the whole process. So with that being said, let's get started with our very first speaker, Jeremy Lent. So Jeremy Lent is from the UK, and he's an author and speaker whose work investigates the underlying causes of our civilization's existential crisis and explores pathways towards a life-affirming future. He's written an award-winning book, The Patterning Instinct, A Cultural History of Humanity's Search for Meaning, and now has a new book, The Web of Meaning, Integrating Science and Traditional Wisdom to Find Our Place in the Universe. And so the title of his presentation is Weaving a Web of Meaning. Jeremy, nice to meet you. Take it away.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Amber, for that introduction. And yeah, well, I'm so excited to be here today and to be kicking off this amazing group sharing. And I'll tell you, one of the things that really drew me, got me so excited about being part of this, is just the very title, Symphony of Mind, because that's actually really is almost how this last book I've just written ends, with this notion of how we can all be interconnected and all share in the same, in really creating this beautiful music together, this kind of music reflecting all of life. So just to give you a little bit of more of a sense of my own work, I look very much, as Amber was just saying, at worldviews and recognizing that it's the way in which we make meaning out of the universe that really affects not just the quality of our own lives, but basically the future direction of all of humanity and of life on this earth. So when we kind of look at worldviews, they're kind of interesting in a way because they're not like something that people speak about. You don't generally sort of take your kid and say, now here's what we believe in our dominant worldview, but it's implicit in every single interaction, every single thing we hear in the media, every single thing we have in conversations with each other. So it's like a lens that shapes our understanding of the world around us. And just like a fish swimming in water, we're not really aware we have a worldview until somebody points it out. And I spent a lot of years really looking at performing my own search for meaning. And what I did was kind of look at the ways in which different worldviews have given a sense of meaning to different cultures all the way from history, from hunter-gatherer times to the present. And I wrote about that in the first book I wrote called The Patterning Instinct, which has a subtitle, A Cultural History of Humanity's Search for Meaning. And one of the things that I took away from that is realizing that the worldview that cultures have doesn't just shape their actual way in which they make sense of the world, but actually has shaped history. And it's led to this dominant worldview that we have today that actually, Kate just described so beautifully in her introduction, almost a little bit like a summary of my book, The Patterning Instinct, as to how these steps of separation arose in our world. And one of the things that we look at when we look at our modern worldview, this worldview of separation, is it's a worldview that's past its expiration date. It's not just dangerous and driving us into this collapse, but as I've done a lot of my own research over a number of years in different areas of not just traditional wisdom, but science, I began to see how much it's based on a series of flawed assumptions that have actually been superseded by modern scientific findings. And so again, as Kate kind of touched on in her talk, like what our worldview does tell us, if it were to be made explicit, is things like we have where all of nature is selfish. In fact, we're driven by selfish genes. That's how life has evolved. And humans are particularly selfish. That's why we've come to dominate the world. And it's all about competition. And we're told implicitly the nature, or explicitly often, the nature is just a machine. It's basically just a resource for us to extricate as much value as we can for ourselves. And in this new book that I just published a couple months ago called The Web of Meaning, Integrating Science and Traditional Wisdom to Find Our Place in the Universe, what I am showing is that actually there is an alternative way of making sense of things that is actually much more in tune with what modern science actually tells us. And the fundamental thing about it is it points us towards a world of deep interconnectedness, which indigenous knowledge and great wisdom traditions from the past and all the way to the present, from Buddhism and Taoism and other traditional Chinese ideas, have been talking about for millennia, that at the deepest level, we're all deeply interconnected. And so just to look at some of those basic things I was just saying, what our modern worldview tells us, as nature selfish, actually what evolutionary biology now shows is that the great steps forward in evolution over billions of years since life first began on Earth have actually all been the results of organisms learning to actually cooperate with each other, not outcompete each other. Doesn't mean there's no competition in nature, but it means there's competition and cooperation. But importantly, it's cooperation that's led to the great steps that have led to this richness, this abundance of our beautiful biodiverse Earth that we're in right now. And, we're told that humans are selfish and competitive. In fact, what we find from anthropology is that what differentiates humans from other primates and other like chimpanzees, orangutans, etc., is actually our focus on cooperation. When we first diverged from other primates millions of years ago, we found that it was only by working together in communities that we could actually thrive and survive. And we evolved over millions of years what are called moral emotions. Things like a sense of compassion, altruism, a sense of loving people who are generous, and a deep sense of fairness. Even emotions like embarrassment and guilt. All these are deeply felt emotions within us. They're not something where we have to overcome our selfish genes. They're actually our instinct is to be part of a group identity. And we know, of course, that nature is not a machine. And what modern science shows us, again, is what indigenous knowledge has been talking about forever, that we're all related with all of life on Earth. Not just in our DNA, but through our deep intelligence. Nature itself has this incredible deep animate intelligence. We see that not just in other mammals like cetaceans or elephants who mourn over their dead ancestors, or all those things. We see them in the trees around us. We now know that if you walk in a wood through the fungal mycorrhizal network in the earth below us, the trees are communicating with each other. They actually have their own wood wide web. And now cellular biologists even know that And a single cell has this incredible intelligence. It communicates with other cells. It has sensors like taking in information and sharing information thousands of times a second. It knows what to do. It actually makes decisions collectively with other cells. That's the world in which we live. And we have 40 trillion of those cells within us. So what we find when we look at that is our very identity shifts from what this modern worldview, dominant worldview tells us of us being separate individuals, to realizing that we are actually life within all of life. There's this great quote I refer to in my book from Albert Schweitzer, the 20th century humanitarian, who actually said, "I am life that wills to live in the midst of life that wills to live." And when we realize that, we can begin to explore what is the meaning of this worldview of deep interconnectedness. It changes our very answers to these questions of who am I, what am I, and how should I live? And really, it's once we shift our worldview to this worldview of connectedness that this world becomes possible, of moving from like what we now understand as the Anthropocene, this world of human domination and destruction, basically, of nature, maybe to a Symbiocene, a world where we can actually take that great natural intelligence of mutually beneficial symbiosis that nature has evolved and learn how to use our own human capabilities to really establish a symbiotic relationship with each other and with all of life on this earth. So it's really that I like to share. And this notion of the symphony of minds is what I find so exciting, that we can actually create this integrated oneness by really bringing our own individual sense making to this much greater coherent picture. So thank you for that. And let me pause right there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that wonderful introduction to the start of the day. Appreciate it.
So we have our second speaker, Friederike Apfel Margolin, and she will guide us in her talk as well. Friederike, please join us.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. I second Jeremy's words about the title of this webinar and congratulate Kate for having come upon it. So I will now try to share, because I have a share my PowerPoint that goes with this. How do I make it a full no. Anyway, well, we'll just make do like this. So, Shamanism Healing Ills of Modernity. This presentation is taken from a book I'm writing with my godson, here it is, in our nonprofit center in the upper Amazon of Peru. It is based on both our transformation. Randy Chung Gonzalez, that's him, was initiated by discarnate beings some 5 years ago, totally against his will. And after a 3-year initiatory journey, became an effective shaman. My own final breakthrough was the last step in a long and slow transformation, the result of my directly witnessing Randy's transformation and also my 25 years practice of ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru. As far as my own final breakthrough is concerned, and I will go to the next, it led me to ask new questions about the sustained effort to eradicate shamanism in the Western tradition. This new gaze of mine turned out to be very revealing. issuing in the recognition that shamanism is a powerful tool for addressing some of modernity's most intractable ills, the ecological crisis and the growing epidemics of mental illnesses, including drug addiction. There's today a renaissance of the scientific study of psychedelics after some 30 years interruption due to shamanistic substances being declared Schedule I illegal drugs in the US in 1970. This reuptake of the scientific study of psychedelics is fueled by the dire situation with growing epidemics of mental illness, combined with the weak efficacy of legal mainstream treatments. I reflect on the meaning, implications, and results of the sustained and successful eradication of shamanism in the West, especially of its role during the scientific revolution in the 16th and 17th century Europe. This period is also known as the Burning Time, that destroyed a medieval European worldview, rather like Amazonian indigenous worldviews. The successful eradication of the worldview of anima mundi, of anima mundi, along with the wars of religion, were fundamental to the invention of a mechanical, insentient, and purely material cosmos. The latter enabled the creation of a system of knowledge totally outside of metaphysics, religion, aesthetics, and ethics, perceived as necessary during these times of endemic wars of religion. A key figure in establishing the rules of the scientific experimental method is Robert Boyle in 17th century England. Boyle invented the public laboratory along with a series of rules to be strictly observed within it. One of Boyle's rules was the complete separation between the seeker of knowledge and the object of knowledge. Boyle in his youth had been an occult philosopher, an alchemist. By mid-17th century, alchemy was already tainted with the brush of heresy. This was so because the occult philosophers shared the worldview of anima mundi with the so-called witches. Those witches consisted in a variety of folk healers, some of whom, and perhaps many of them, were shamanesses and shamans. The worldview of anima mundi saw the cosmos as being completely integrated. Plants, minerals, animals, humans, the planets, the stars, and more were all connected, the whole pervaded by the divine. However, the Pope had declared witches to be heretics in 1484, and with them most of the occult philosophers who came to be suspected of heresy as well. By Boyle's time, it was necessary for him to make very clear that his public lab was the opposite of the occult philosopher cabinet of experiments, where in his youth, he had pursued simultaneously a knowledge of the cosmos and a refinement and purification of his own soul. This development came on the heels of Descartes having established the philosophical basis for this new materialist knowledge. Yes, I'm here. This meant that the worldview of anima mundi was completely delegitimized and replaced with a mechanical, materialist, reductionist one, radically separated from the sacred and the ethical. These new developments open wider space for the complete alienation between the seekers of knowledge and the object of their knowledge. Seeking knowledge of the world could no longer be simultaneously a refinement of the seeker's mind or soul. This new knowledge rather soon came to be known simply as science, namely not one more knowledge system among the many existing in the world, but the only correct universal one, totally separate from any religious or cultural or historical tradition. From the point of view of the new scientific knowledge, shamanism is at the antipodes of the mind. Shamanism has been eradicated in Europe during the Burning Times, which lasted until around the end of the 17th century. But I may add that this eradication started in the 4th century current era. However, in the Americas, although laws were passed, at the beginning of its colonization to eradicate shamanism, that effort failed and shamanism survived. Shamanism, and with it the knowledge of psychedelic plants and mushrooms, was preserved by indigenous societies throughout the Americas in the face of severe persecution. In this old historic battle between the new knowledge, namely science and shamanism, the latter has ironically reemerged as seemingly the only efficacious remedy for curing a long list of mental illness. I have included the ecological crisis in the ills of modernity since its planetary dimension only began with the Industrial Revolution. To introduce this aspect of the healing effect of shamanic substances, I will turn to the work of a neuroscientist, Jill Bolte Taylor. In her latest book that came out this year, she digs deeper into the insight she gained through a massive stroke suffered in 1996 that destroyed or incapacitated her left brain. There, she deepens our understanding of the role of the left and right hemispheres of the brain. In the minutes following her stroke, she vividly describes how she perceives her body as not separate from the rest of the environment. And this is what she writes: "When my left thinking network went offline, my ego self also disappeared. I could no longer identify my physical boundaries of where I began and where I ended. I perceived myself as a gigantic ball of energy that blended fluidly with the rest of the universe. My perception of myself bypassed all the boundaries and literally became as big as the universe," end of quote. Not being a neuroscientist, but rather an anthropologist, my response is to do a sort of cultural analysis of the birth and growth of Western modernity. What emerges from Taylor's account, as well as other scholars and neuroscientists, is that Western Europe has not only denied that we're part of the cosmos, but that to think or feel so is to belong to a state of mind declared heretical by Christianity and confused, backward, and primitive by science. In other words, what Jill Taylor's words reveal is that with the invention of science, we have not only enacted strict rules to separate us from what we study, but we have determined that this separation is not only necessary for achieving truth, but in fact reflects our reality in the world. So I see that my time is up, and I have a lot more to these slides. Is the 30 Years' War, where 35% of the people. So this is, and Davi Kopenawa is a Yanomami shaman who calls the taking of their psychedelic dying. And my experience of taking ayahuasca is that it feels like dying. What dies is your ego self. Your left brain goes offline, and it opens up a completely different horizon. And this a horizon where this is an indigenous woman in front of a lupuna tree, the tallest tree in the Amazon forest, communing with it. It opens a horizon that we're part of the universe. And the last is Randy and I and a group of friends who came to do an ayahuasca retreat at our center. So I unfortunately will have to shorten my talk here since I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederica. And just to acknowledge, for those who would like to know more of her work, she was raised in France. I'm sorry, she was raised in Morocco, but born in France. She's originally from there. She is a professor emerita of the Department of Anthropology at Smith College. And she's also founded the Sacamama Center for Biocultural Regeneration in the Peruvian Upper Amazon. She founded this in 2009. She's published over 55 articles and 13 books. Her work focuses on critical approaches to development and globalization. And the title of the presentation she just made is called Shamanism Heals Ills of Modernity. So thank you again very much, Frederica.
Thank you, Frederica, and I so appreciate the perspectives you're sharing, as well as the ones who've gone and who have yet to come. There's just so much uniqueness and diversity in each speaker, and yet I'm hearing just so many themes of connection and interconnectedness, and is so much about how I know Julian Gresser's work to be, who's our next speaker of the day. Nice to see you again, Julian. Just want to give him a brief introduction before he begins. So Julian Gresser is from New York, and he lives in California at the moment, and he's an international attorney, professional negotiator, inventor, and recognized expert on East Asia. He's also the CEO of Big Heart Technologies, a humanitarian benefit corporation founded to provide tools and resources to empower collaborative innovation and negotiation training. And he is here today to talk about love, synchronicity, and the celebration of life. So take it away, Julian.
Thank you very much, Amber. Delighted to be here and very much enjoyed the presentations I've heard so far. We live in a world that is getting better and better, worse and worse, faster and faster, and it's all happening at the same time. I believe there's a pathway through chaos. My presentation will focus on 5 discovery questions. First, the challenge. How near are we to a tipping point? We are all made aware, as mass media and the internet tell us, the corona pandemic, daily outbreaks of violence in the cities, the loss of biodiversity, the contamination of our food supply, the irradiation of our residential communities by RFR emissions from densifying cell towers, pollution of the oceans, the exploitation of the heavens, and climate change. Less well observed, but daily experience is what I call the sacrifice of authenticity. As Professor Shoshana Zuboff of Harvard ably describes in her magisterial, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, most private and personal information today is being appropriated, homogenized, packaged, and fed back to us with a singular purpose to manipulate our behavior for the profit of monster companies, or I should really say their puppeteers, the well-fed directors and officers. Viewed from one perspective, each of these powerful forces appears separate. However, if we will look more closely, there are common patterns, common drivers, and they all are tightly coupled. From a systems perspective, it appears that disequilibrium is accelerating. We are fast nearing a tipping point. Tipping point means that the smallest additional perturbation can set off cascades of destructive turbulence throughout these tightly coupled systems. How well prepared are we? My second point, a pathway through chaos. Like the myth of Theseus, the founder of Athens, trapped in the cave of the fierce monster, the Minotaur, is there a string we can grasp to lead us through the darkness into the light? I would like to introduce some of the current exciting work now being done in closely related fields of coincidence, synchronicity, and serendipity, which I will refer to in my presentation as CSS. Humiliating to pride as it may be, we must recognize that the advance and even the preservation of civilization are dependent upon a maximum opportunity for accidents to happen, wrote Friedrich Hayek, Nobel Prize winner. Carl Gustav Jung, a pioneering psychiatrist, first formally defined synchronicity as a seemingly random event that has deep personal meaning for our life. There's now a vigorous discussion among researchers as to whether coincidence, synchronicity, and serendipity are one and the same phenomenon or different. For our discussion here, I simply would state the most important findings from this research. First, CSS is far more common than we suppose. It can be viewed as a communication system among human beings and all of nature that's beyond our consensus notions of time and space, that not only our mind, but our heart has a role in this process, and we can learn to understand and communicate individually and collectively with sources of CSS. CSS contains highly valuable insights, just as Dr. Hayek suggests. CSS is amenable, and this is perhaps the most interesting, to a mindset, as Christian Bosch in his book, The Serendipity Mindset, urges. In other words, we have dominion over our own destinies, much more than we currently suppose. Third, on love, heart, and synchronicity. How are love and CSS related? In my own personal explorations, I am discovering that love is closely related to CSS. I am discovering that heart and love are a place of refuge in this sea of chaos. I would like to invite all of us to join me in the following experiment to prove this. I pay tribute to one of my great teachers, the Qigong Grandmaster Li Junfeng, who was the chief coach of the Chinese Wushu teams, which were awarded over 100 gold medals. From the Chinese perspective, what I'm going to show you right now, today, can be viewed as a powerful inner martial art. A caveat: no expectations, no assumptions. The path toward resilience and balance. How do we find it? So I'd like everybody just to pause for a second, kind of relax. If you're sitting with somebody, look at them, be with them. And here are just a few steps by which you can, in an instant, connect to what I'm talking about. Step one, bring your attention to the heart, to your heart, not a pump, but the energy field around your heart. Just close your eyes, bring your attention to your heart energy field. Experience it. We're going now to go beyond meaning, directly to experience. Now, click your fingers, click. You're entering the energy field, your heart energy field. Now this is my own particular technique. You can do anything to gain access to the CSS field. You connect your heart energy field to whatever is happening in this very second, in this moment. You stop, connect, look, and as Brother David Stendhal Ross says, you go with the flow. Observe what's happening. If this is a very developed experience and practice, we can explain later how you connect the dots, how you understand the secret code by which the universe communicates. Final point here is simply, if you derive some sense of joy and gratitude for connecting with anything, it doesn't have to be only a person. It can be a tree. It can be a hummingbird. It can be a stone. I have found something extraordinary. When you connect the heart energy to everything that appears in the moment, it gives back love. Even a stone gives back love. If you derive joy from that, pay it forward. Paying forward is an expression of gratitude for the bounty of life. Pass it on, line for line, deed for deed, to increase the joy or lighten the burdens of others without asking anything back. Paying forward is how we turn the wheel. What is the path toward collective resilience and balance, is my fifth question. In a world that is profoundly out of balance, I believe one antidote lies in restoring balance and doing so in a way that its benefits multiply. I'm suggesting that this simple CSS practice offered is one way to begin to engender what I call a positive resilience multiplier, which in itself will restore balance. As we collectively begin to cultivate integral resilience, our collective capacity to turn adversity to advantage will strengthen. I'm suggesting today that this event we're having right now is the CSS event and an opportunity that holds one of the keys to building a community-wide collective resilience in the face of these compounding challenges. This meeting of our hearts and minds is a CSS event which allows us to shift awareness and how we manage in the face of what it appears overwhelming difficulties and challenges. I will close with a quote from the Nobel laureate Albert Camus, who expresses in the language of poetry what I'm saying. Great ideas, it has been said, come into the world as gently as doves. Perhaps then, if we listen attentively, we shall hear amid the uproar of empires and nations, a faint flutter of wings, the gentle stirring of life and hope. Some will say that this hope lies in a nation, others in a man or woman. I believe rather it is awakened, revived, nourished by millions of solitary individuals whose deeds and works every day negate frontiers and the crudest implications of history. As a result, there shines forth fleetingly the ever-threatened truth that each and every one on the foundation of his or her own suffering and joys builds for all. To conclude, if you want to pursue this more in greater detail, I have a number of books I've written on the subject and dialogues on bbelon.com. We've launched a CSS expedition with some of the most fascinating scientists, psychiatrists, economists, explorers, poets that I've had the privilege to know in my life. And we welcome the audience. If you are interested, we have perhaps 20 seats, 25 seats, which we welcome. Just to send me an email, juliangresser77@gmail. We'll arrange a special call and we can Zoom meeting, and then we can give you some of the basics of what we call 5 minutes to resilience. So I'm very grateful to Kate and Jennifer, to Kate and Amber and Ken for inviting me in this presentation today, and I look forward to our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Wonderfully stated. Our next speaker is Henna Maria. Henna was born in Finland. She's now living in Spain. She is an activist, speaker, poet, and practitioner of ancestral healing arts. What she learned with the Sipibo tribe in the Amazon rainforest. She's the founder of Dawn of Peace, a creative community and peace organization, and an international police for freedom movement. About educating police and civilians about our natural rights in order to rehumanize our societies and restore trust between the security forces and the people. The title of her presentation is called The Archetype of the Activist. Henna, great to have you with us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for creating this beautiful gathering. I'm honored to contribute to the Symphony of Minds. I would love to explore the archetype of the activist from a spiritual perspective. I will draw from the knowledge of ancient cultures and sacred lineages and show you how their way of being is the perfect blueprint for the activist. Can you see me, by the way, because I can't see my own image on the screen for some reason. Okay. So first of all, the activist represents the archetype of the modern warrior. And by this, I don't mean someone who is instigating or waging war, but someone who is willing to stand up for what is right, even in the face of tyranny. The warrior in the indigenous culture is someone who protects the innocent, and especially those who cannot stand up for themselves, including the plant and animal kingdom, the water and the earth. I have a mantra which I hold at the center of my work: to serve the sacred, to protect the sacred, to revive the sacred. In the cosmovision of the free people of the earth, all is alive and all life is sacred, whether human or animal, born or unborn, wanted or unwanted. The indigenous recognize that every form of life has its unique purpose here on earth, embodying a teaching, a medicine. By communing with the trees, the animals, the elements, the warrior perfects their senses. Every one of our 5 senses has a higher spiritual dimension to it. We know of clairvoyance and clairsentience. However, these are not supernatural gifts in a sense that these abilities are only available for the select few. These are supernatural gifts, meaning that they are inherent and natural to all of us human beings. So to develop the eyesight of the eagle and the heart of the hummingbird, the warrior consciously connects and communicates with nature. This is what is asked of the activist also. The ability to cultivate wisdom in a time of conflict, to rise above the base reactionary state of consciousness and train one's mind to keep a steady focus on the bigger picture. Many a battle has been avoided by sharing the peace pipe. This is what we must revive in our culture as well. The noble gesture of meeting our adversary with humanity, doing everything we can to remedy the situation with compassion and fairness. But if the enemy has no respect, is blind to brotherhood and deaf to reason, creating chaos and mercilessly destroying everything, the warrior does not hesitate to pick up their spear of truth and shield of faith and say, "You take me first." The warrior is willing to lay down their life to protect their sacred culture, as he knows how precious is the heritage of his ancestors, how there is no price too high for freedom. And let us recognize that the enemy now is not a legion of bloodthirsty brutes, but a mentality, a worldview. It is the attempt to totally sever us from nature, and thus from our inner nature. The battlefield is in the minds and hearts of humanity. Secondly, the activist also represents the archetype of the healer, taking the knowledge of healing the individual into healing the community. This requires clarity of vision and proper diagnosis. Without comprehending the roots of our collective malady, we cannot apply the correct treatment. I see that the core issue is loss of knowledge of self and life, loss of knowledge of God. We have religions to fill our minds with dogma when the native people do not need belief. They know the divine creator intimately. They do not need Bibles or scriptures, as nature to them is the living Bible containing the living word of the living God to the living men. Without remembering our true nature, our divine origin, we are orphaned and disconnected from the spiritual source which nourishes our souls and blesses our lives. So this void, this emptiness, drives us to act from a place of desperation as we suffer from the trauma of the great abandonment, the disconnection from our true father and mother. In this blindness, we fumble around in the dark, seeking spiritual fulfillment from places where it is impossible to receive. And the more we consume that which is hollow, the further our hearts erode into depression. Our cultures are a manifestation of this cosmic trauma. From the desperate attempt to find meaning, we have become insatiable, devouring all of Mother Earth's precious beings, draining her lifeblood and cutting down the evergreen garden. As our eyes have become stained with images of horror, we struggle to recognize what true beauty is. And thus we become deceived with the mirage of artificiality, living our lives behind masks, adorning ourselves and our houses with lifeless objects, forgetting that true beauty comes from the purity of our hearts, not realizing that this fortress of objects becomes our own prison, further separating us from the great spirits. So how to heal a society that has fallen? Through the knowledge and practice of natural law, bringing back the principles of morality and harmony. The natural law teacher, Mark Passio, brilliantly explains the law of freedom. The more moral a society becomes, the more free it becomes also. For only immoral people require a violent control system. So the more conflicted we are in our values and actions, the more conflict we create in the external world. As within, so without, as above, so below, as the universe, so the soul. This timeless axiom by Hermes Trismegistus is the mirror to help us recognize the law which creates our manifested reality. The activist first observes the symptoms of sickness in our society, realizing he's looking at the effect which has been brought to life by ourselves. Reality is an aggregate manifestation. Therefore, every effect which is observable collectively has required a collective causality. But rather than staying as an eternal victim, suffering the painful effect of our own immoral acts, the activist seeks to become the cause, the positive cause, which will set in motion an evolutionary process. So the healer, the activist, must be a master of the principle of polarity, knowing that all extremes can be reconciled, that all polarities can be brought into an equilibrium. If the effect is dehumanization, the remedy must be rehumanization. If the effect is demoralization, the remedy must be remoralization. So in order to inspire this healing in our fellow sisters and brothers, we must first begin the healing with ourselves. Only from lived experience can we emanate the energetic signature of spiritual alchemy. How we ourselves have turned lead into gold, our traumas into wisdom. This is how we create an evolutionary freedom movement through inner transformation, which will resonate and inspire the hearts of many men. I would like to end with the eternal wisdom of the great master Yeshua, who embodied Christ on this earth. Gospel of Thomas, verse 70. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. This is the key to healing humanity. It works in two ways. Firstly, if you do not bring forth your trauma and express the truth of your inner world, this trauma will destroy you. If you do bring forth the pain, it can finally be healed, and this liberation will save you. And simultaneously, if you do not bring forth your soul's calling, your sacred dream, this unexpressed yearning will eat you inside and destroy you. But if you do bring forth your purpose, the beauty of your heart's archives, this joy will save you. Thank you. And if you want to dive deeper into the path of the true peace activist, I invite you on my course, The Foundations for Pioneering Peace Activism, which you can find at hennamaria.community. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Henna. That was wonderful. And acknowledging now that we've had our first 4 speakers, and there seems to be a thread as we started out hearing, a thread running through all of these presentations. We're about to move into a period, just a short break.
What a beautiful song. What a great way to just have a brief moment to integrate what's been said already. So welcome back, everyone. Just a reminder that if you have any questions to ask any of the speakers for our later Q&A and discussion, please type it in the chat. It'll go directly to the hosts and the panelists. So just want to plant that thought in there. So let's resume, shall we? I just want to start off by saying what I'm hearing being talked about right now reminds me of Charles Eisenstein's work about how we're storytelling creatures. And we need to be identified with the story to make sense of and make meaning of the world, as Jeremy said so eloquently earlier. And that Charles says humanity's current story is that story of separation, which seems to be a common thread here. If we see ourselves as separate from each other, from our world, from the environment, it's easy to create a culture of violence and domination. And this actually really speaks to our next speaker, Bruce Gagnon, who actually expands this story of separation beyond Earth and into space. So Bruce Gagnon, we'd love to invite you to turn on your screen and be a part of the conversation. And while he's doing that, just a quick introduction. Bruce Gagnon is from Bath, Maine. He's a Vietnam era veteran and trained as an organizer by the United Farm Workers Union. He's impassioned about keeping space for peace. And Bruce has coordinated the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space, which is an organization affiliated with 170 other organizations around the world active around the space issue. So the title of his presentation is Master of Space or Master of Disaster. Welcome, Bruce. Nice to see your face. My Project Censored story about the 5G satellites was inspired by you, so nice to meet you personally.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be with you all. I'd like to share what I've learned over the years since I began working on space issues since 1982. So please let me do that. First of all, this is a photo from the Space Command headquarters in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm very disturbed by this particular logo that they also wear as a patch on their uniform. It really frightens me, this idea that the United States, 5% of the world's population, believes it could be the master of space. To me, this is evidence of a major spiritual disconnection. The United Nations was looking ahead in 1967 when they helped create the Outer Space Treaty, no weapons of mass destruction permanently stationed in space. The planetary bodies would be the province of all humankind. They were recognizing that this global war system that we have today that came out of the 15th century, came out of Europe as they were looking for new markets and resources to control. It's now been embedded into our consciousness around the planet. And the UN really wanted to make sure that we didn't carry this with us as we inevitably ventured off into space. Back to the Space Command, a planning document that they put out in 1997, Vision for 2020, where they say the US will control space, dominate space, and deny other countries access to space, that in fact we would be the master of space. And what we've learned over the years that the Space Command annually has a computer war game where they practice a first strike attack on Russia and China. And they use the X-37 on the left in the picture, a successor to the shuttle, the military space plane, that would fly down from orbit and drop an attack. And it's now been announced that it would be able to carry nuclear weapons on board. But the Space Command says that this falls outside of the Outer Space Treaty of '67 because it's a weapon of selective destruction, as the weapon on the right, the space-based laser, what they call the Death Star at the Pentagon. So since 1984, Russia and China have annually been going to the United Nations, introducing a resolution to ban all weapons in space. Close the door to the barn before the horse gets out. But the US and Israel have been blocking this, what we call PAROS, prevention of an arms race in outer space. I think it's instructive to remember that the US space program was basically created by former Nazi scientists. On the left at the top is Wernher von Braun, the brilliant rocket scientist who was brought to the US along with 100 engineers and scientists that worked for him inside a mountain tunnel called Mittelwerk, where thousands of Jews and gypsies and French resistance fighters, communists were brought as slaves to build Hitler's V1 and V2 rocket program. On the left in the picture at the top is Major General Walter Dornberger. He was Hitler's liaison between von Braun and Hitler, overseeing the program. When von Braun needed more slaves, Dornberger made sure to make it happen. Dornberger came to the US along with von Braun at the end of World War II under Operation Paperclip, and he became vice president of Bell Aerospace in New York. And in the 1950s, he testified before the Congress of the United States, saying, "Gentlemen, I didn't come to this country to lose the Third World War. I lost two already." And it was his vision that we have orbiting battle stations in space that would control the pathway on and off the planet Earth and give the US and its corporate masters control of the planet below. So when we see the Master of Space slogan, I can't help but hear a similar slogan, Deutschland über alles. And I wonder just how much eating of the military industrial complex of this ideology came along with the people, 1,500 former Nazis during Operation Paperclip. Since the 1960s, the US has been launching nuclear power devices into space. On the right, you see a mock-up of a nuclear reactor rocket, a nuclear reactor powered rocket to Mars, something that NASA has now put out a bid for and that will be tested in the next few years just over our head in lower Earth orbit. At the same time, the nuclear industry views space as a new market. They're looking at having nuclear colonies for mining operations on the moon and Mars and various asteroids and beyond. And what we've learned is, you know, when you build these nuclear devices, they have to be made somewhere. And as it turns out, it's at the DOE laboratories, Department of Energy laboratories, spread out around the country. Los Alamos did the generators for the 1997 Cassini mission that launched 72 pounds of plutonium into space. And as it turned out, this newspaper article reports that there were 244 cases of worker contamination when they were fabricating those generators at Los Alamos labs in New Mexico. So it's not just some theoretical possibility that there will be an accident. We're endangering lives and water systems and air here on Earth, even before anything is ever launched. But there have been space nuclear accidents by the US, the former Soviet Union, and Russia. We have this list and much more on our website at spaceforpeace.org. Recently, we've heard of Elon Musk talking about he wants to nuke Mars in order to terraform the planet to make it livable. Terraform means turning it green, like the Earth, like the beautiful, bountiful Earth that we live on. So instead of cleaning it up, these Mars aficionados are saying that we need to move our civilization there because, quote, the Earth is a rotting, dying, stinking planet. So Elon Musk says he wants to explode 10,000 nuclear weapons over the atmosphere of Mars in order to change it, to make it livable. Imagine the launching of 10,000 nuclear missiles. President Obama in 2015 created a new law allowing for corporations to go out and mine the sky. People like Musk and his friends are now preparing to move their rockets to do so. And we're seeing an explosion of launch facilities and launches, tens of thousands of mini satellites going up in the years ahead, mostly for 5G and for military applications. As it turns out, 5G would play a considerable role in increasing the speed and ability of the United States military to do its military efforts to attack other places more accurately and much more quicker. Astronomers are complaining about the loss of night sky because of all the constellations now being envisioned. And we're seeing a destruction of the ozone layer with every single rocket launch that is happening as the toxic fuels move up into the atmosphere. They're eating away at the ozone layer. There's a whole host of proposals to increase the number of launch sites around the world in order to launch all of these satellites. This particular picture from New Zealand, Rocket Lab, they were promised it would only be a civilian launch facility, but like so many, it's been turned over to Lockheed Martin, and so far, all the launches are military. This drawing done by a dear friend of mine from Florida many years ago, I think really underscores this spiritual disconnection we see today as capitalism looks forward to moving into the heavens, to grab a hold of the planets, to make money off them, to sell the public on this notion of this grand idea of moving civilization into the heavens. I think we have a lot to learn before we go. Every year we hold Keep Space for Peace Week, this year from October 2nd through 9th. We urge people around the world to help us during this time to bring a greater consciousness to the people of the planet about not planting our bad seed of war and greed and environmental degradation into the heavens. We must keep space for peace. Thank you all very much.
Hey, hello, everyone. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. Also, just acknowledging that many of you out there might be thoughtfully gathering questions, and we invite those questions to be placed in our chat box. So if you have a meaningful question or two, please put them there. And just after our presentations today, we will host a discussion period. So those questions will be aired. We invite them, so please place them there. Our next speaker, Kazu Tanahashi, forgive me, Kaz, was born in Japan and is active in the United States since 1977. He's an artist, a writer, a worker for peace and the environment. His publications include Painting Peace, Art in a Time of Global Crisis. He is the founding director of the World Without Armies and a fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science. The title of his presentation is called Think Deeply and Act Effectively. Welcome, Kaz.
Thank you, Ken. Hello. Very nice to see you. I have been learning a lot. Let me read a poem I wrote some years ago. Our time. This is a time you and I share. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Time for reflection. This is a time you and I share. A decade ago, now, a decade in the future. Time for love. This is a time you and I share. 100 years ago, now, 100 years in the future. Time for action. This is a time you and I share. 1,000 years ago, now 1,000 years in the future. Time for vision. I guess we are working in different fields, all seeking for a large-scale social transformation. My painting Circle of Peace imagines your work, and your work. You might call it Symphony of Minds, or Symphony of Visions, or Symphony of Actions. Now I like to propose 4 basic principles for social change. This is from my book, Painting Peace, Art in a Time of Global Crisis. 1, no situation is impossible to change. 2, a communal vision, outstanding strategy, and sustained effort can bring forth positive changes. 3, everyone can help make a difference. 4, no one is free of responsibility. Then how do we make our work effective and bring forth a maximum positive result? We need contemplation and deep thinking to understand the situation, our goals, objectives, best potential collaborators, and the most brilliant process. When I was young, when I was 13 years old, I was trained by Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, a martial art. Used to be the art of fighting and conquest. But right after the World War, when I was 13 years old, I studied with him in a small group and witnessed right in front of me. The master was transforming this martial art into the art of peace and collaboration. That was the only class of Aikido in Japan, not to speak of the rest of the world. The master was extremely efficient in his body movement. He turned all the incoming negative forces attacking him into positive forces and threw down his opponents in an amazing way. We, his disciples, took parts of his opponents. By training and training, we, his disciples, learn how to be more and more effective in our body movement and mind movement. I think there is an effective way to reverse the current global crisis with population explosion, climate change, environmental destruction, violence, poverty, and starvation. That is to reduce the extra disproportional military budget and weapon productions. We could use some of the astronomical amount of destructively used money to reduce the problems for our sustainable future. We need to reduce campaign contributions and large-scale lobbying by big corporations and rich people. A great majority of us are not extra rich. So in democracy, we can make this change possible if many of us are awakened. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kaz. Interestingly enough, my screen won't be able to, isn't turning on. So here I am though. Thank you, Kaz. And thank you for reminding us all of the power of art and the power of deep thinking and contemplation when addressing the issues of our time. You know, there's actually a quote that art makes the revolution irresistible. Tony Bombara quoted that. So Thank you, Kaz. And actually, our next and final speaker, Jean Houdon, is an artist in his own right as well. And he'll actually conclude our speaker presentations along with the meditation that he prepared for all of us to tune into. And he's actually going to present in the form of a video. But before he does, just to introduce him, Jean is from Quebec, Canada, and is an author, social activist, and a musician. And he's launched various initiatives to facilitate peace, environmental awareness, and spiritual awakening. He's published 2 books, A Guiding Manual for a New World, and an eco-spiritual novel called The Immortal Child. And for the past 10 years, he's devoted much time and effort to help counter the growing threat of electromagnetic pollution. So the title of Jean's presentation is Knowing and Sensing Who We Truly Are Can Make a Whole World of Difference.
Hello. We've been blessed with a most wonderful planet, where life thrives in an infinite number of ways, thanks to the physical laws of nature that we are gradually discovering through the inquisitive mind of scientists and also of nature's lovers who are observant of its wonders. It is as such a person who loves to feel and connect with nature that I'll speak to you today. From a very young age, I have been enthralled by the intricate beauties and innate designs of nature. Anyone who loves to take a long walk in a forest or any other place where one can marvel at the magnificence of the natural world and the resilience and innate intelligence of wildlife is driven by the same unremitting admiration of how nature works to create amazing species that can perpetuate themselves over millions of years. Compared to what life has built, our young civilization is full of hubris and short-sightedness despite our technological achievements. Most of us know intuitively that our current path of profit-seeking exploitation of the once bountiful resources of this planet is leading us into a bleak future, global environmental collapse, and even possible extinction of most complex life forms. Something is deeply amiss in the foundational common perceptions driving our everyday choices and actions. Several countries have the means to obliterate all life in a few short fiery minutes of nuclear madness. We are the only species that can both create the purest, most enchanting forms of art, expressing the astounding wealth of intelligence and sensibility our souls are capable of, and the means of its own destruction out of a primal fear of being conquered and dominated by a perceived enemy. Religions, philosophies, and sectarian doctrines born from the attempts of a few trailblazers to make sense of existence and of its underlying mysteries have all failed to create a common vision of our place and role in nature. The cacophony of conflicting, often divisive theories about who we are, about what life is for, and about what happens after the end of a few decades of life provides a background of dizzying confusion to the searching mind, trying to find some kernel of truth in this melting pot of belief and sheer ignorance. As a teenager, I realized that none of what society was teaching me was reliable intelligence, and that I had to put aside everything I had learned to seek my own truths that would gradually form the foundation of the human personage I was building. Experiencing things firsthand, especially when it comes to discovering the true nature of the sentient consciousness, observing everything through my physical senses, and nudging me in the right direction through the still small voice within of my intuition, became the bedrock of who I am. Through first using psychotropic substances and then delving regularly through meditation in the deepest recesses of my mind, I gradually felt my way to a more enlightened understanding of what life is for, and what I came here to do and to be. Aligning with who I really am led me to create an open channel with Source. This word being a generic substitute for the word God, encompassing the unfathomable mystery of this universal presence whose infinitely intelligent mind has expressed itself through billions and billions of planets bearing the hallmark of life in billions and billions of galaxies as far as the Hubble telescope can see. As I grew to accept as a human being to follow the guidance I always sense, moment by moment, as to what I am to think, write, say, do, and most importantly, be, I became more and more in tune with the natural autopilot driving the doings and beings of all life on this planet, one among countless others. As a musician, author, networker, mystic, and through every other facet of creativity and abilities being expressed through this physical body, I could delight in creating music, books, global spanning networks, and a wealth of mystical creations, all in the service and as an instrument of Source. As a human being with a transient personality formed through the myriad experiences of interacting with others and with some quirky peculiarities aggregated through the influence of all that reach my conscious and subconscious minds, I am the epitome of imperfection, as we all are. As a soul living yet another physical experience, endowed with the very same natural abilities as the Source who gave it existence, I am the epitome of perfection in progress, as we all are. Through this soul's ancient vibrancy forged through countless embodiments in physical vehicles, as well as through many sojourns in the dimensional realm of light between lifetimes, I can experience in the blink of an eye a state of bliss as profound and tear-stirring as one can imagine angel feels when they are vibrationally close to the light of Source. Words are unable to convey the feeling of being in a cocoon of love energy with tingling streams of light pulsing through every cell of your body and radiating ad infinitum. All I can tell you is that any soul-attuned human can experience the same bliss as soon as the illusion of being merely a mortal human being dissipates. This is the most fundamental shift in perspective one can experience on this planet. This shift is our only way out of the path of self-destruction we are on as a species. This is the core of my message today to you. Once you feel deep within your oneness with all that is, how can you wish to hurt any living expression of Source, be it a tiny creature or another human vehicle for a soul made of the same cloth as your soul? If there is so much suffering on earth, so much mindless destruction, violence, hatred, it is because nearly every human being is caught in the throes of a powerful illusion and is utterly ignorant about who he or she is. Dispelling this illusion requires time, reiteration, and patient love. We are getting there. We will make it through. We are awakening. Because I know experiencing something firsthand is the only way to truly learn something. Just like when you learned for the first time what happens when you touch something burning hot. I would like, in conclusion, to offer you the chance of feeling this bliss that comes through you when you are getting close to the source of all-knowing love itself. Those of you who took part a few days ago in the guided meditation called Global Consciousness Shift Activation may more easily, even almost instantaneously, reach this state of blissful radiance that is making a whole universe of difference to any soul feeling it. Yet, if you let go of all pretense of being in control and let the light of love shine through the heart of your soul, you will be blessed with the knowing that you are loved, with the healing that love gives, and you too will know. To light the flame of love in your heart, all you need is a spark from the deep-seated memories of how you feel loved when you are between lives, when your consciousness is restored to its blazing radiance, healed from all the residual scars of embodiment, and rejoicing at the heart of Creator Source, sensing the oneness that never ends, experiencing love as the true nature of who you are. Welcome back, beloved soul. Welcome back.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope that 10 minutes was kind of a nice way to take some space and further integrate. If all of us can turn on our videos and our audios as we'll begin our dialogue together. Thank you all again for your wonderful and unique shares for the past hour, and hope that this discussion can, as what Kate says, now we can meld our minds together as we be in discussion. So Ken has the questions from the audience. We have some questions from the audience, and Ken is going to ask them out and also call on you all. So please raise your hand if you want to speak to a question, and also just for the speakers to keep your shares concise to allow opportunities for everyone to speak on something if they want to. Okay. All right.
Right now I'm being blocked from showing my video, so please allow me to be.
Same with me, Ken and Amber. I can't have my video work.
Interesting.
There I am. Okay, thank you.
And same with me, Jeremy here.
Same with me. Same with me too.
That would be good. Welcome everybody.
Amber, you either Ken or Amber in charge of this. You'll have to.
I will be moderating. I will be moderating this portion of the discussion. Yes. So if you aren't able to put your picture up, if that's your video up, I'm talking to speakers now. You can always use one of the icons at the bottom. Just raise a hand by clicking on that, and I will make sure you're called upon. Okay.
Yeah,
So
and this is the co-host.
yes, there you go. And I believe Julian wanted to start us with a question.
Yeah, okay. So I think this has been a really, truly wonderful set of presentations, and the vision of the Symphony of Minds is also extraordinary. However, there's a missing dimension here. A number of the speakers have sort of called for it, particularly Rustenyan's very chilling presentation and Kaz Tanahashi, which calls for the embodiment of the spirit of this conference in practical action. And I'd like to say that there's a dimension of this by which the warrior healer that Henna talks about so strongly achieves a local habitation and a name, and that is through the law. And I lead a kind of Clark Kent life in which I spend most of my time working at jugular cases, of which I want to illustrate three, to show that our whole discussion does not have to be left at the level of aspiration, that there are ways today, right now, that are happening in which we can describe this as legal acupuncture to affect massive change with a very, very delicate legal move. And so that will give power to this conference and this webinar. Bruce's discussion, poignant discussion of the militarization of space, at least has some chance to be challenged. We have now a major action with the FCC, which is the critical lead agency in the United States that's permitting this HARA. And we have put together with Bruce's support a petition for rulemaking that looks at all the critical issues from space debris to cybersecurity to the environmental catastrophe with one action. If we are able to either get the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, or if we get President Biden to declare a moratorium for 180 days to at least look at this insanity, we will have been able to accomplish the spirit of this conference. We are very near to being able to accomplish that because we are seeing that let's call it the opposition, is not monolithic. We have a major space company, Viasat, that's actually citing our precedents involving the National Environmental Policy Act to oppose what Elon Musk is seeking to do in a specific context of the change of elevation. However, what we are seeing is that the agencies, these companies are not monolithic. There are many people who understand the HARA and are trying to act responsibly, and we actually have them aligned. The second critical.
Julian, we need to keep, everyone needs to keep our comments brief during the discussion. So you said a lot.
Let me make
a closing point so we can actually have a discussion.
But I will strike one other case. But just to say, since many of the participants here are concerned about 5G, if we are able to persuade, as we will this year, we believe, the DC Circuit to recognize that the FDA has not approved officially a safe policy on RFR, the entire thermal standard being promoted by the industry and the FCC will collapse. That means this entire 5G field will turn on its head and there will be an opportunity for sanity. So my concluding point is, let us bring together the power of synchronicity that I described and all the other good thinking that we have here, combine it with the musculature of legal action, public interest action that understands that there are acupuncture points in law that can affect massive beneficial change within a second. And this is the power of what I'm trying to convey and integrate with the central message of this meeting.
Thank you, Julian. And let's perhaps talk, if any of you would like to speak now, but we can also talk as we progress with how to take action on this and other things that will arise in our discussion. Jeremy?
Yeah, thanks. I guess what I'd really like to do is expand that out from what Julian was just talking about. And I absolutely with you, Julian, that ultimately the change has to happen in specifics, changes in law, and ultimately it's law that kind of directs how much of our society works. But at the same time, we have to look at this whole systemic change that's needed. There is no one law, one change that will change this whole overall system that we're looking at. We need to be part of this much more comprehensive systemic shift in the way our whole culture and civilization works. And what I'd like to just put out there is this notion that each of the steps we take, and sort of thinking of it as part of this complex self-organized system. And it's the system itself that has to be shifted. And none of us are going to be the sort of quote unquote hero who actually changes the world, who is the one that makes all the difference. It's all of us acting together as part of this global systemic whole that will enable this truly deep transformation of our global society that has to take place this century if we're going to have a real flourishing future for humanity and the earth. And so one thing I would just say as to put out there to each of the people in this group and to people who are listening in is to feel into this recognition that each of us is part of co-creating that future. There's this kind of liberation that gives it in a way that it's not like up to each of us alone to make the difference that we can see, that will absolutely change everything. And at the same time, it's this awesome responsibility because each of us is part of that systemic shift. And the way in which we can really make the most impact is not just by focusing on our particular thing, my book or so-and-so's, action strategy or so-and-so's practice of this or that. Each of those are so important, but let's also look at what those around us are doing and spend as much time as we're pushing our own thing to open and amplify the power and energy of what others around us are doing, because it's ultimately the network's power is a function of an exponential of those connections themselves. It's the connections that count, and amplifying those connections is how we'll actually make this transformation happen this century. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Jeremy. Well said. And if we can, all speakers, please keep your comments as brief as possible. I know we're all very passionate, as we should be. This is our future. But please be as brief as you can, and thank you. Who else would like to speak to these unfolding issues? Yes, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick one. Something that we have started here in southern Spain, in Andalusia, and I know some of my friends are also doing this in Northern California, is creating a grid of cloudbusters. So as these crazy people are erecting these death towers all around the earth, there are some of us who are using sacred technologies to combat that. So this is something we can do. We don't need anyone's permissions for that on our own lands. We can look into the technology of William Reich, and you can purchase these online or you can create them yourselves. And these have actually been helping to put down some of the fires in Northern California just in the last few months. So they are actually working. They are creating natural weather patterns in the micro climates where these cloudbusters are. And also just to bring the knowledge of water, how very important water is right now, and how we can communicate with water, how we can heal the water. And so I see that these crazy people are very difficult to convince bottom up, that we should create our own, solutions and not wait for anyone's permission and just start implementing them, sacred technologies and putting our medicine into the land. And this way know that ultimately our consciousness is what commands our vessel. And that I believe that even though these EMF radiations are getting higher and higher, we can adapt as organisms on this earth to that. Of course, it's not ideal, but I strongly believe that is possible. And that's why I refuse to fear these technologies.
Thank you, Hannah. And would you possibly be able to put any resources in the chat box that might refer to, say, a cloud buster or water treatment, just so we all, whoever's looking might access those. Thank you. Yes, Frederica.
Yes, just to reinforce what Hannah has said, you know, with my long experience with shamanism, I absolutely know that there is a level of efficacy that science cannot grasp at all. And I think that's what Hannah, that's what I'm hearing in what Hannah is saying, the sacred technology, because shamans can affect the world, the real world, very powerfully. With speaking of diseases that doctors see nothing wrong, but the person is suffering, and a shaman can heal this. And I think that healing capacity can go beyond human bodies, and traditional shamans heal the forest, the waters. So I very much know that this exists, and it is extremely efficacious. So shout out to you, Hannah. Very nice.
Mm.
You are descended of the great Sami shamans. They were the greatest shamans of Europe. They were in Finland and all of Scandinavia.
Sean, I believe you have your hand up.
Yes. First, I just want to acknowledge everything that I've heard today is just amazing. And it's this combining cross-fertilization of our ideas coming from what's inspiring us to be on our personal mission in life, which is going to help us through in what's the most amazing challenge we've been facing and that we'll face now collectively. I'm very concerned, like Julian, about how to make change happen. I've been very involved in all kinds of movements as an activist. And what I understand is that now we have to trust that all of us around the world, as Jeremy was pointing, are doing our bit to help change the whole world in a positive way. There are, of course, laggards who have not yet got the memo, but I think and I trust, and that's, you know, if you work from a place of despair and, you know, I'm powerless, nothing is going to change. But if we work from a place of, yes, we're all being guided to help change positively, and in so doing, evolve ourselves to a point where we will just realize what has to be the new reality, the real new reality we would like to see arising, then it will come to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Kaz had his hand up, virtual hand.
Oh, Kaz, there you are.
Yeah. So I was suggesting that to challenge military-industrial complex and then weapons industries, and then reduce the extra disproportional spending of the military affairs. This is a huge amount, and then if we convert this some small part of money for climate change work, you know, there'll be enough funding for that. And also maybe in case of the United States, if we could maybe convert 10% of the official military budget to healthcare, and then all people can be covered, paying nothing for the military, for the healthcare system. This is a very great challenge, and then since the time of President Eisenhower, people think this is impossible, but we have to think about the cause. The cause is a kind of the democracy is corrupted, so the money counts, so the money buys electoral seats, and the money buys policy making and governance. So how do we kind of reduce campaign contributions and then large-scale lobbying? There are many different ways to do it, but the ultimate goal is public-funded election. So there are many countries, there are good examples, maybe some states are doing, so we can learn from other people. Maybe we can talk to our city council members and trying to make the city elections for mayors and city council members public funded. So no one has to pay their own money or friends' money to run for the public office, so that they don't have to pay back by a kind of corrupted way of policy making. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate, your mic is off. You'll need to turn your mic on. Still no audio. There you go.
Sorry. So I was struck when Hannah Maria said that we have nothing to fear. I agree, we have nothing to fear. But in terms of the technology, so I'm wondering how to balance when we face problems in the world, be it technology or cruelty to animals or factory farming or whatever the issue is, when we face these things, how much do we bend and not bend, but call on our own resilience to tolerate or possibly evolve to be able to deal with these problems, and how much do we say, no, the problems need to stop and we need to work towards that? How to balance that? You know, we can't, it wouldn't be right to say, yes, animals, factory farming is horrible, but we can live with it, you know. So that's a question.
Well, maybe I take an answer to your response to your question, which is, I think there are different dimensions. One is that the law, there are legal opportunities, legal tools to statutes, case decisions, administrative processes that are available to affect balance. In fact, we've created, as you know, with your support, something called the Balance Group with some of the top lawyers in the country, as well as scientists and others, to bring these actions to the goal of restoring balance. So that's a technological part. The other part of it, which Jean has touched on, Hannah, everybody has touched on, is the role of the heart. And in the heart, we have an extraordinary resource along with our mind. I call it big heart intelligence, which itself, by its very nature, is balanced. And so if we can, and somehow or other, the heart has been stripped away from our whole discussion of law, the whole national dialogue has subtracted heart. If we can, in the beginning, in micro ways, individual ways, and as John points out, collective ways, and Jeremy as well, reassert heart. Naturally, the heart has intelligence with in combination of our mind will restore dynamic balance, because there's no such thing as fixed state balance. It's the dynamic flow concept, but it's how to restore flow. So the mind has a role, the heart has a significant role, brought together with the hand, which, by the way, in East Asia is how you write integrity. We will restore integrity by bringing a dynamic balance to intelligence, to heart, and the capacity to take effective and a focused action.
Amber, you have a response?
Yeah, Kate, I think that's such a great question about, how do you balance acceptance and taking action, if that's a simple way to summarize your question. And it just had me thinking about my own experiences working in a school district, and I do restorative justice work. So I work with police officers, and I work with students who are in the criminal justice system and helping them stay in school and transition back to school. And I'm constantly faced with the question of how do I, work within the system I have and also take action and stand up. And I think that we really can't answer that question of how do you balance acceptance and taking action without being in relationship with each other. And so what I do is, I think so often the people that we see as the people in power, adding to the destruction, adding to the violence of our world, we tend to cancel them or other them, and we dehumanize them, and we don't allow for that dialogue to happen. And so I've been actively trying to build a relationship with the local police officers that go to our school. And it reminds me of Jane Goodall's work, where I watched a recent documentary about her and her life. And she actually would spend like at least a few weeks working with oil companies, working with the drug research laboratories that were inhumanely treating monkeys. And she would actually get to know their process, get to know them as people, build those deeper relationships. And sooner or later, they were able to have a dialogue about why they were causing harm and how she could help them understand that. And they worked with her. And all these activists were like, how dare she talk to these oil companies? And how can she talk to these people that are inhumanely treating these animals? And she responded by saying, well, how can we get them to change? How can we get them to understand our purpose if we don't talk to them, if we don't see them as humans too and work with them, not work against them? And so when I think about any sort of taking action or learning how to accept what's already here, I think it's always in relationship and in dialogue and willingness to see past our differences and talk things through. So I just feel like if we were to answer that question, it has to be through those often uncomfortable yet extremely healthy and wise conversations across our differences.
The dictum of a relationship first and business second.
Yes.
Might really help, right? Hannah, you had some thoughts.
Yes, as an answer to Kate, your question, I think of what Buddha taught in his time, and he said when people are in a burning house, they can be blind to their environment. So how to convince them to get out of the burning house is you have to first get out of the house, and then you have to make it look attractive what you're doing outside of the house. So I think that's kind of what we have to do, is to make our option, what we are communicating, our message, attractive to the people. So I've realized in my journey of activism over the last 12 years that it has to come through inspiration, to inspire, So if we have the energy of judgment, the person will not be able to receive the message. They will put their defense mechanisms up. But we can communicate our no from a place of authentic feeling. So I often, when I talk about animals, I talk about the beauty of connecting to an animal and how I felt when I first realized that I'd been eating them and that they are individuated souls just like us human beings. So it was my own experience and being authentic and vulnerable, which has inspired others. Not telling anyone what you're doing is wrong, although it may be true, but people are not really able to, in my experience, receive judgment, but rather they change through inspiration. So that's kind of my remedy. Lead by example, talk, as Amber, you were saying, and make your activism attractive.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely. Jeremy.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Well, I just so love what both you, Amber, and Hannah were just saying in terms of that whole point of leading by attraction, offering something positive as this way forward, and relating to the people who are in those organizations who are doing the destruction, because almost nobody wants to actually be an agent of destruction. I mean, almost nobody wants to go around saying, yeah, I'm going to leave a horrendous world for next generation. I'm going to like cause death around, but they of course are part of a system that's doing it. And the one thing I want to add to what you both said is the importance of sort of holding the sort of both realities at the same time, that we need to absolutely relate, talk to those police officers, fantastic. And just like Jane Goodall, and talk to people within the corporations doing the harm and get them to realize they can do something in a different way. And at the same time, we have to recognize, even though these people are good-hearted people, even if they're doing bad, they're also part of a global system that is actively destroying the world. And so much of the time, we get stuck in what Anand Giridharadas talks so well about, this myth or this fiction of doing well by doing good. You know, people say, I've got this super idea, I'll start a company that will do this good thing, and I'll work within the system and I'll make it better. And, you know, incrementally it might make it better, but we have to recognize that we're in this global corporate-based capitalist system where basically of the 100 largest economies in the world, 69 of them are corporations, transnational corporations, which are chartered legally on the fundamental basis of earning and gross improvements in shareholder profits above all else. They're essentially, if they were persons, as we're told they're legal persons, they would be psychopaths. And that is the system that even good-hearted people work within. So what I'm sort of trying to put out there is this recognition that the people themselves almost always are good, at their hearts, good people, even if they seem to be doing bad. Relating to them, working with them, showing what they can do is one thing, and not being satisfied by those incremental improvements within the context of a system that is actively destroying the world, but looking at those, what Donella Meadows talks about, those deep leverage points in the system that actually need to be changed, the meaning making, and the fundamental laws, like say how a corporation is incorporated, needs to be changed so they're not allowed to just go after shareholder profits without looking at people and planet at the same time. Things like that are what we have to be pushing on. So anyway, just wanted to add that perspective to those great insights you both had.
Yes.
So these systemic acupuncture points, as Julian was saying, these places, the deep leverage you were talking about, Jeremy. So there are these points of change. If I'm hearing a number of you speak, one of those attending the webinar today is asking about that. This is Robin. She says she lives near SpaceX and owns a 3rd acre near the launch site, SpaceX launch site. She's watched the continual overstepping of SpaceX since their inception, especially this last year. And their presence is one of the most unusual, and this area of land is very biodiverse. And it seems like this state refuge wildlife park, they don't seem to show any concern for this local issue. So might there be a way of bringing the local and these acupuncture points together, I guess, around her question as well?
Yes,
Amber?
Ken, I think it's great that we're introducing an audience question. I am looking at the time. It's 12:20.
Yes. 10
and
minutes
we did want to have time to have a closing circle. So perhaps there might be a way to integrate a response you might have to that question into your closing, if that works.
Well, I was just going to give her a specific and practical answer to her question, which is there are two or three pieces to it, almost with one line. There are legal rights, most likely, that the local community has, both under state law, but also under federal law, that can check this action or at least force and compel some consciousness. But law alone can't solve it. Effective grassroots organization, in my view, to develop a systematic approach to this dialogue that I think Amber wisely suggests, in ways that you can understand instantly whether you've done something that's effective so that everybody can learn it. And if there are errors so that you're not dying, you can adapt and become more effective. Community organization, effective legal action, and adequate funding will produce the results that the inquirer wants to seeking.
Thanks, Julian.
Thank you, Julian. And just as Amber points out, we're wrapping up our last 9 or 10 minutes. So maybe we could each take a minute to pull your thoughts together and conclude our process today.
Yeah, and how about we start in the order of the speakers? So Jeremy, Frederic, Julian, Henna, Bruce, Kaz, Jean, and then Ken and I will also share too. So Jeremy, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'll just keep it really short and simple, just to remind each of us that we're all co-creating the future. It's not a spectator sport. It's something that we are actively producing. We are weaving together every moment, every decision we make, every statement we make, every choice we make. And by realizing that, realizing how big this system is, I just urge everyone to focus their attention on what are others around us doing. How can we skillfully play a part, not just in our particular weave, but in this whole systemic symphony of minds, basically, that is taking place around the world in order to really lead to that true transformation that's needed.
Thank you, Jeremy. Frederic, any last closing thoughts?
Yes, I just want to say that David Kopenawa, who has traveled all over the place for the defense of the Amazonian rainforest, when he went to Europe for the first time, he said, you know, the spirits are there. It's just nobody's calling them. They're there. And that makes sense because in Europe, and the last ones to be eradicated were very recently, it was the Sami shamans in Scandinavia who were eradicated by the Protestant church in the 18th and 19th century. But in the rest of Europe, it was done by the 17th century. But they're there, the spirits. We have to learn to communicate. And I think Hannah's language is beautiful because she calls this sacred technology. It's a perfect label for what shamans do, but all of us can learn to call on the spirits to be our allies.
Beautifully said, thank you. Right, Julian, closing thoughts.
So I, following Hannah's lead, view myself as a sort of Taoist samurai. And the part of the arsenal of capabilities is what I try to suggest today, in addition to law, is this extraordinary part of the human heritage, which is coincidence, serendipity, and synchronicity, which I suppose in Hannah's words could be, or Frederic can be referred to as sacred, sacred technology. And what I wanted to suggest is, as one part of it, heart, the cultivation of the energy of love around the heart and connecting it to what in the moment gives us a pathway immediately. And I completely agree with Jeremy with his point, that his model of single action and a wide diversity of actions which work in a symphony, to borrow Kate's term. This, I think, offers a viable pathway, a measurable pathway, a replicable pathway forward through the chaos, which a number of us have pointed out.
Appreciate it, Julian. Thank you for that. All right, Hannah Maria.
I would like to share a prayer. May our hearts be inspired by the innumerable lives given to guard our humanity. May our spirits be strengthened by the memory of freedom. May our minds be protected by the song of creation. May our voices kneel in service to the truth that liberates. And may our hands become blessed by the deeds that heal our human family. Irake.
Oh,
Thank you, Hannah. What a beautiful blessing. Bruce.
I'd like to share a picture if I can. I live about 3 blocks from Bath Iron Works here in Maine, where the Navy builds destroyers that are outfitted with missile defense systems. And myself and friends, we go there regularly and hold large banners. We have a lot of good artists in Maine that have created wonderful images. I'm a visual learner. So when we're talking about climate or talking about conversion of the military industrial complex, we like to show people that it is real and it could be real by showing beautiful images. And we're finding that we are actually touching people's hearts, touching their imagination, and most importantly, having conversations. I usually stand on the other side of the street where there's a sidewalk and workers walk by, sailors and shipyard workers, and we hand them flyers and I speak to them. And I've made friends with a few of them. And it's because we go regularly, they're getting to know us in a way. So I think this is a really important way visually to show people that there is another path that we could be walking if we could imagine it. Thank you.
Thank you for the visual too. Beautiful. Thanks, Bruce. All right, Kaz, any last thoughts?
Some of you talked about the Amazon forest, and it's so critical to save our land. For that affects everybody. So I live in the United States, and people are so generous, and then tax law is kind of enable us to do some fundraising, and I'm working with Brazilian friends. Many of them, this project is called Think Deeply, Act Effectively. How to maybe identify some maybe small area, small project, and then bring the kind of fund and then find a very transparent, honest way to do maybe helping kind of reforest the Amazon forest, very small area, so that we can see the actual effect, and then we can use this prototype. Maybe we can multiply it by many people. So this is currently I have been working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaz, and for often bringing up the power of organizing and coming together. So thank you. All right, Jean, any thoughts on your end? Jean, you're muted.
sorry. Okay, as Kaz just said, we need to act locally from a universal perspective. You know, you all remember the famous think globally, act locally. Part of my presentation was about realizing and helping the change from thinking of us as a human being to being, sensing, and acting as a soul living a physical experience. As such, we can access, we can all become like shamans, have our intuitive guidance that can help us contribute to the global change. But we know we're faced with powers that be that have their pulse on the media, and they control the global narrative. So for the global narrative to change, for the structures that imprison us into a system of capitalism and destruction of everything, the change has to come from within. And if we do the change within individually, it will, as we were expressing in the solstice meditation, like for ice to form on a pond, it takes a crystal. So we are the crystal creating the change around the world through changing ourselves, through allowing ourselves to become who we are as souls and letting ourselves be guided to do what we came here to do. So, and finally, before closing this, I would like to thank Kate very much. I think we owe her a great debt of gratitude for being inspired and acting on her own inner guidance to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. I guess Ken and I will go very quickly. I know it's 12:31. Asking for those who can stay to stay, and we'll wrap up really quickly, and Kate will finish us off here. But just to say that I was a slumbering and disengaged millennial for most of my childhood. And when I woke up, and a lot of that was really facing myself and my own wounds, and then starting to face the injustice of life and getting involved in activist and social change work, I realized, just like Alistair said in the chat, you know, the inner and the outer world are so enmeshed. And I could only understand the violence and the injustice in the world by understanding how those systems show up in me. And that if I want joy and peace for others, I need to create that for myself as well. And so this whole process, you know, isn't easy. And I think the work that we do isn't easy often. You know, your beliefs about yourself and the world are questioned and challenged. And I think to some extent, certainty is created in the mind. And so I think that this connection that we're talking about is what holds us in when there's so much unknown and uncertainty and confusion and suffering out there. So those are just my thoughts. Yeah, thank you. Ken, any last thoughts on your end?
I do. I've been teaching over 40 years, and I've noticed my students seem increasingly helpless about our moment in time. They seem really lost. And I often ask them, so where is your generation? Why aren't you showing up? And they basically say, and they say it pretty clearly, we don't feel what we do makes a difference. And almost all revolutions that change history, the youth are active. So I really appreciated today a number of the messages about that no is not enough. Yes, we might even find that acupuncture point, but no, it's certainly not going to work for social change. We need the power of presence is what came to me. Just this whole sense of really being a unique human being that can stand as an example for my students in my case, that can give them a real sense of an option by the very fact of who I am. So I know I've been a bit low energy today, forgive me for that. I'm aware of my presence being a little bit less than usual. And I just really acknowledge others for reminding me that it's really about inspiration and about embodying something that really might motivate the youth in our future.
Can I just add just a final point, which is that perhaps at another setting, there's a deep message offered by Kaz in his painting. That painting represents an Enso. And what you just said, Ken, the despair of youth, which are usually the change agents, Kaz in some sense in his drawing or his painting is offering a message. That message is that in a single action, in a single moment, this is what an Enso is. He calls it one stroke painting. He draws, of course, that is perhaps a few more strokes, but in one action, like that, it collapses. You move through meaning to a direct experience of everything. And I think if more and more younger people who are change agents can begin to understand that the power to affect change is right within their hands in this very instant, that it can galvanize the kind of movement that I think we all in our several ways envision.
Can I add 2 more words? I can testify to that because coordinating the Police for Freedom movement internationally, I get to talk to police officers who have just woken up and they've just come to take action, and they want to lead a group of police officers in their country who stand up for people's rights instead of actively rob people of them. So it is happening all the time, and it can happen in an instant.
All right. Well, Kate, why don't you take it away? This was your baby. This was your vision for all of us to gather here today. So who would you like to share as we close?
Thank you. I wanted to share a thought and then conclude. Speaking on Jeremy's statement that the systems themselves need to change, not just addressing the symptoms, but the systems. I think together the panel brought up so many wonderful ways, be it opening to synchronicity from Julian, or what Jean suggests through meditation, coming to get to know your source, and Hannah Maria, and coming from your essence, your source, so that we live the truest is a step in kind of loosening the soil, loosening the structures around us. The hierarchical structures, the hierarchical systems that we have now are there because we are disconnected, because we are not getting nature. So laws and systems have to be enacted to keep us in check. But once we come from source, once we come from our essence, then the systems themselves can start to dissolve and be less hierarchical, and only be called into light touch hierarchy, and only called into need where there's an actual problem. But if we're living more from source, from essence, and living more locally, the systems themselves will be less necessary. So going on, I just wanted to say that I am deeply touched in so many ways by the riches that each speaker has brought to this webinar, and that the blend of minds and hearts that emerged was itself synchronicity manifest. Each person speaking from their essence added a unique seasoning to our exploration, their talent, insights, and perspectives to our exploration. And much as this webinar evolved, I'm not a great organizer, to be honest. I'm a little bit on the ADHD side. So the webinar gets organized by, an idea, and then standing back to see, who responds, and then dipping back in response to what came, again, from my truest self, and in the case of everyone here, from our truest self. Perhaps if we apply this same technique as we walk through life, collectively we'll walk a path of connection, love, harmony, and peace by moving in and out. We take one step, the universe responds. We respond to that response. So we plan to continue this discussion that we have with a Facebook group that we've launched. Thanks, Jean. Co-creating a vibrant future. And it will be a meeting place where we can continue this co-creative process initiated by the webinar. Our hope is that we will continue exploring how to best set the stage for a future vibrant with peace, love, and harmony. I thank you for caring enough to attend this webinar, and our deepest gratitude to the panelists and moderators for so generously sharing their time, hearts, minds, and insights. Blessings to all. Mwah.
Thank you, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you.
It's been good. Best wishes, everyone.